Welcome to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church.
Welcome back to the Means of Grace podcast. I'm Jesse Enniss, the Director of Communications for the Leadership Development Team.
And I'm Kim Ingram, the Director of Ministerial Services for the Western North Carolina Conference.
And today we are talking with a group of WNCC leaders. And so I would like to ask if each of you could please introduce yourselves, indicating where you live and where you serve.
Hey, my name is Brian Elwell, and I live in the wonderful town of Stanley, and I serve First Methodist Church Stanley on Common Ground.
I am Reverend Mandy Jones. I am in Concord. I am the senior pastor at Forest Hill United Methodist Church.
Hi, I'm Karen Easter-Bayne, the lead pastor at First United Methodist Church in Hendersonville.
Hi, I am Reverend Dr. John Henry Jr. I live in Graham, North Carolina. I'm serving as a local pastor at Holmes Grove United Methodist Church in Greensboro.
And hi, this is Mark Conforti, and I am at First United Methodist Church in Salisbury.
So friends, we are glad to have each of you here with us and are looking forward to this conversation that we really think will be a more conversation that you will have with each other as we spend some time together. So we know that the Christian church is kind of in an interesting time in its history. For at least 50 years or maybe longer, the church has been in decline in terms of membership and participation. And of course, at this time in the United Methodist Church, we're at a pivotal moment where we have this opportunity to take advantage of to set a hope-filled course for our future as a denomination and as for United Methodist churches in districts, annual conferences, and of course in communities. We are in a reformation moment. And so this really kind of shapes our conversation for today as local church leaders, wondering how you're noticing a need to shift in how we do church.
I'll go first. One of the shifts that I have seen and keep hearing from others and reading about is that we can no longer assume that anyone knows the basics of the Christian faith. And that has everything to do with what and how we communicate, how we preach and teach, offer discipleship. All of that has to change. And I'll give you an example. I talk frequently with young parents about having their baby baptized. And I've really seen a shift in that first of all, they're very surprised when I bring that up because it's not something that has ever occurred to them. And then they are much more hesitant to have their baby baptized because they have no understanding of what it means or why we baptize infants. And so that's just one example of many where I see that what we used to think was just, everybody knew these things. That's no longer the case. And so it means that we have to be very clear in our communication, and we have to be clear on our why. Why do we do everything we do? Why does the worship space look like it does? And why do we celebrate different seasons of the year? And who really is Jesus? And just, from beginning to end, it's a whole new era and very exciting because we get to introduce the Christian faith to a brand new generation.
One of the things that I notice is that, of course, we have to be mindful that we have lots of online worshipers. We have to be welcoming to them, and sort of explain some of the things that we're doing and saying, and we have to make them feel welcome because you never know how you're gonna touch somebody,
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the resources that I think most of us are familiar with, that both and that whole we have to welcome our people who are coming to us in person in the sanctuary, as well as those who are worshiping online, and being open and welcoming to them.
I think for me in this moment, it has been really interesting to see kind of the post-COVID church. I hope we can say post-COVID. Really hope it's post-COVID because the people who are here and who are engaged want to be. There are no expectations for people to show up anymore. So the people who are here do want to grow deeper and do have questions and do want to belong and have good conversations that are hard and difficult. And I love that. As a pastor, I thrive in that space of connecting with people and creating communities of belonging. So I find a great hope in where we are, that we can do some deep, good, hard, life-changing ministry in this moment.
Yeah, I agree with Mandy. We've seen a lot of people want to experience transformation and they want to be present. It's not a to-do list thing. Here, the most beautiful thing we've got to experience is getting to wrestle with the power of doubt and how doubt can be this wonderful formational thing and transformational thing within a congregation. What we've learned is there's this craving in this whatever postmodern, whatever church we're in, of deep, authentic faith. And I think that's one of the powerful things that coming out of COVID, if you are at church, you want to be there. And if you're in church, there's a lot of folks that just want to have a fuller faith that's of authentic God. And that's one of the beautiful things of our faith as Methodists. We have like a really beautiful, authentic faith where folks can come and just share everything they have and know that they have people that are praying for them and building them up in the faith. That's our historical thing. And I see a reclaim of that. And my prayer is that we keep going feet first into that.
I appreciate and agree with what we've been sharing here. And it strikes me that we not only have an opportunity to move forward, but we need to move forward instead of looking back and wondering what if. I know that we've all been in leadership situations where there is this tug trying to pull us back to how things used to be. But now, more than ever, it seems, we are really positioned to take a step forward in faith. And I'm excited to see what the next steps are.
I would add one more. I think we're finding that we can no longer we can't afford to be inwardly focused. We have entered into a new apostolic age where we are called to be sent out to meet new people and invite them to come to know Jesus and to be engaged and involved in the community around us and not just try to continue being an attractional church and hope that people will come find us, but we're being sent out. And that again is full of hope for me and very exciting.
I agree. Mark and Karen, you both spoke to kind of like a change in focus that we feel like our churches need to have, a focus away from the past, but also a focus away from an inward mindset towards an outward mindset. And so I was wondering, how can leaders help their churches shift their thinking and being in these directions?
One of the things we need to do is we need to build relationships with people we do not know. We have to engage in evangelism. We have to be able to share our faith story, to people, who we do not know and build these relationships. That's the way of this century, this 21st century, to be missional.
I think one of the points to do what John's talking about just now is have clarity around the value of being invitational and welcoming and hospitable, and let those initiatives guide a renewed vision of evangelism, that it's not about just adding names to an Excel spreadsheet so that we feel better about ourselves as an institution, but it's about having clarity around what God has done for us personally, communally, and having a deep desire for other people to experience that as well. And let that experience motivate us to reach out.
That's so true. And I think it's also helpful if we can equip folks, not only be an example ourselves as leaders, but equip our people to do just that. And I found it really helpful to be exposed to churches that are already doing some of those things well. It's always easier to shift your mindset when you can see an example of it, of how it's being lived out. So the more we can find those churches that are doing some of those things well and invite our people to get to know them or learn from them or go and experience what it's like to be part of that community of faith, the easier I think it is for us to help them and for us to shift our mindset as well.
I think I've gotten a little bit more bolder than I used to be before COVID. Some days I would sit on my hands a little bit, but we've gotten a little bit bolder. And we have a really great food pantry here, and used to think, okay, I'm just going to give you food and that's it. I've gotten a little bit more just wanting to ask folks, tell me about you, tell me about your story. And we do this in all sorts of ways. But I had a man just yesterday who gone in and told me about how he had been deeply hurt by the church because he has an autistic son. And there was a church that said, like, autistic kids can't be here because, well, their autism has come from something that is not of God. And that was just unreal. And just getting to pray with him and also say, like, your son is valued and is cherished, and to have that opportunity to share, like, your son is valued. That was a really big moment for him. There was some, like, we both wept with one another. And I would not have done that before COVID, because I would have just given the food, because that seems like the good way to do evangelism. Hey, feed your belly. Jesus did that first too. But I gotten a little bit more bold just to ask a little bit more about what's your story with Jesus. And sometimes folks just share it. And I think, like, we as a church, we need to equip people to be bold and just talking and asking, in not a weird way. Don't be weird about it, but be like friend and just show that you care. Instead of, do you know about Jesus? He's my Lord and Savior. Anyways, but I'm going to be quiet and pass it on. But get bold, y'all.
I think for me, a piece of that boldness comes from making sure that my relationship with Christ is healthy, and that I continue to be passionate in the things that I do. I think with the seasons that we have been through just in the last 3 years have been hard. And there have been times when we have been tired. There have been times when I have been tired, and just trying to take care of myself in ways that allow me to have rest and energy to be passionate, to be excited, to preach with energy and enthusiasm. Because I think that that's a key place where people want and need to see excitement and passion around our relationship with Christ. If that's, doing that when you're handing out food or just any place that you're engaging people, whether you're meeting new friends or whatever, just allowing that light to shine and taking care of ourselves in a way that we have an opportunity to be passionate. Because I think as pastors of churches, we have a lot of things thrown at us and a lot of expectations from a lot of different people, and it can easily wear us down, and that passion can fade from time to time. So just being aware of that, I think, is really important, to have an outward mindset and to be invitational to the gospel.
Something we ought to do with that outward mindset is active listening, especially as we're building relationships with new people and we're listening to transitions that people are experiencing in their life. Major decisions with which they're wrestling and trying to discern what to do next. Maybe they're suffering a loss or experiencing something that would likely have a spiritual question underneath it. And they may not recognize it as a spiritual question, but it has something to do with life's meaning, purpose. Where is God in all of this? And I think when we can listen well and build those relationships, especially with new people, those will present great opportunities for us to be welcoming.
Yeah. So as I think about some of the things you all have just said, Karen, about learning from one another, and I think, well, the primary purpose probably of this Means of Grace podcast is a chance for people to learn from the guests on the podcast. And so I'm going to seek kind of your all's wisdom, because you all are all fruitful leaders and have been at it for a while. Some of what we've talked about in doing things in a new way is going to require time and energy spent in ways that leaders have not been spending time and energy. And then I think about what Mandy said, which is crucially important. We have to take care of ourselves. If we're not healthy spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally, then we can't be there for other people. And then the last thing I'll say that Karen said was, around partnering with laity. So we can't do it by ourselves. We need to do it with other people. We've got to do these new things. Like all of this can feel a little bit overwhelming when, especially we've been training, we're used to doing church in particular ways. So I wonder what kind of advice or thoughts you might have on how do you give some things up, or how do you hand some things over, or how do you manage looking at things in a new way when they're a church full of expectations of you and doing things in old ways? Like, do you have any kind of advice or wisdom around this?
So someone had mentioned the 8 strategies to build new relationships, and one of them was to create hangout places. We tend to want to do everything at the church. We can meet at a park. We can meet at a restaurant and meet with people. You can even meet with your laity at places outside of the church and to discuss some things that you want to do for your community, as well as, to get out and at the same time, meet new people. We're kind of stuck on tradition, we have to do everything. Everything has to take place in the fellowship hall. Everything has to take place in the sanctuary.
And John's so right. We've got to create spaces that are outside of our building. And then we've got to be real with our parishioners. There was the bishop of the Missouri conference, his name's gone, but I'll find it one day. And he was real with us. And he said, y'all, can you please, at least do 8 hours of your work week where you're not in your church office and you are building real friendships with folks. And I went back to my SPRC and I said, guys, you all told me you want to have vital churches. That was the thing on my recommendation list. If that's going to happen, you need to give me permission to leave this place and take 8 to 12 hours a week of just building relationships with people. And then come with me so we can do it together. And there was this wonderful showing, if you want your church to start being a little bit more evangelistic or missionally minded, whatever the fancy term is, just get back to the basics and say, are you meeting friends in the world, outside of your home, your family, your church? Are you actually meeting friends? Mandy, she's really good at meeting friends, so get to talk to her about that. But are you actually getting to know people, being friends? And don't do it in a way that's so fake, but do it in a way that's, I care about you. I want to be authentic with you. I love you. And I think we all have that drive. If you're listening to this podcast, you have a drive to show someone you love them. So be real with your church. Say, guys, we all need to take time out of our week to be in relationship, build friendship with folks.
Yes, that was Bishop Bob Farr from the Missouri conference. He talked about the journey to friendship. Friendship creates connection, connection creates community, and community creates belonging.
Amen.
And also discussed the 3 mission fields, those you already know yet, and those you do not know yet, and then those on social media. Mm-hmm. These are people who we want to connect with and stay connected.
One of the pieces of advice that Bishop Farr gave speaks directly to Kim's question. He said there is oftentimes an impulse in a local church to want to reach out to the people who are technically church members, but they haven't come around in a very long time and they have fallen away. And people think calling those people to try to bring them back, that's evangelism.
Right.
He made he made the point, of course, no, that's not. And then he said something that really has stuck with me. He said, you're better off reaching out to new people rather than who want to be there anymore, because you'll get twice the fruit and half the aggravation.
I would add, I think COVID has provided at least one blessing. And that is that we can't do things the way we used to. It's provided a great opportunity for us to experiment, to let go of some things, to try some new things. We've sort of been forced into that. And so the more we can take advantage of that as leaders, and maybe even if we couch it as just an experiment, to say, let's not do this thing that we used to do, so that we can try this other new thing and just see how it goes. That's a great way to sort of let go of some things, because we do have to make space in not only in our time as leaders and pastors, but in the church's time and energy level as well. And I've found that the church has never been as open to those experiments and to saying, okay, let's let go of something, than they have been during the pandemic, just because we were forced to.
I think it has given us an incredible opportunity. And I think one of the things that we were able to do is identify our values, the things that were most important to us, and then build our priorities around our values. So instead of just picking everything back up that we used to do, we began to say, what was the point of that? What was the value in that? And how do we want to live? How do we want to do this a new way? And then setting some boundaries around that. Just really very basic things that just help us achieve it. For example, I was talking to somebody on my staff this morning, and I said, my expectation is, if somebody sends me an email, I'll return it within 24 hours. If somebody sends me a text, it'll be less than 2 hours. And if somebody calls me on the phone, I'll do my best to answer it. But that is just a way of me prioritizing life in order that I'm not checking my email every 3 hours. But that creates a boundary that allows me to focus on the priorities that we have established that directly link back to our value system. And so just some really basic things that we can do to keep us on track, I think has been really helpful in trying to figure out this new life and new expectations as we move into a season that's very different in my local church than it was 3 years ago.
But you all have been referencing Bishop Farr. He was a part of the recent conference that you all attended in St. Louis called Beyond, which was hosted by Matt Miofsky, who's a pastor of the Gathering UMC. Could you tell us more about that conference and your experience there?
I think what the conference offered for me was some deep questions that I can reflect on more so than answers, which I really love, because I don't think many of us have all the answers right now, but it is a season of doing some questioning. One of the things that I have sat with since I have gotten back was a question of, what are we risking for the sake of the gospel? What are the things that we do in our everyday ministry that make us nervous? And how is that reaching the world? And so that's one of the things that's really stuck with me. And I've been thinking, what am I doing in my everyday ministry that is risky?
I got so much out of this conference, and I was happy that we got to go. One of the things that Matt Miofsky said when he was speaking is that the church that's going to be fruitful in this new season is one that is invitational and really based on forming relationships, not programs and not activities and not events, but relationships, that is Christological, where we're clear about our faith in Jesus and who Jesus is, that is transformational. And in that, he was talking about how people in the church share our faith stories and are willing to talk about the ways that our own lives have been transformed, how our community has been transformed through God's grace. So we have something to tell others about and have our own experience to draw from. That church is incarnational, and that we live out what we're saying that we believe, and that it is missional. And I just found that really helpful. And especially the whole conference really talked a lot about the invitation part, hospitality, relationships, finding new people to build relationships with. Going back to Bishop Farr, one of the things he talked about was, he said, if we don't become good at meeting and spending time with people we don't know yet, we will be out of business. And that was a pretty stark way to put it, but it's true. And he shared his own story of someone that he got to know over time and build trust with. And it took 8 years of their friendship and conversations before the person risked asking a faith question. And so that's the other thing that I got out of it, is we also have to be patient to realize that the kind of work and building of the kingdom that we're called to now will take time, and we may not see instant results.
Yes, and one of the things, back to Bishop Farr, talked about making room for unconnected people, and it really kind of hit home these past few weeks. I not all the time, but I usually preach from the lectionary, and we talk about unconnected people. The Samaritan woman at the well, and then we talk about the blind man who was born blind from birth. How Jesus was with them and spent a lot of time, with them, healing the blind man, making the, as I call it, the mud pie, and healing him, and being with the woman at the well, one of the longest conversations with anyone, how Jesus spent time with those who were unconnected, and in turn, they became followers.
One of the features of being invitational, Matt Miofsky talked about, there's a difference between an announcement and an invitation. And this really struck me. It's so basic, but I honestly hadn't put a whole lot of thought into it. He said, we're decent at making announcements. Hey, my church is having a thing, and that's it. We don't say anymore. But an invitation is a yes or no question that requires a response. And I've been really thinking about this, and it's helped me to realize that our people need to be coached up on how to be invitational, how to actually phrase it, not to put words in their mouth, but to give them the freedom to recognize it's okay to ask a yes or no question. Will you go with me? And let them respond.
Yeah, that was really hit us hard. And so one of the first things I did coming back from conference was we talked a little bit about that invitational word with our leadership team. And I had my SPRC chair, she's about my age as well, and in our 30s, and she said, I have a new neighbor. Well, she's not really new. She's lived there for 2 years, but you know what? I really like her. I think I'm going to invite her to church. And I said, that sounds great. Awesome. And she goes, and they were having cornhole, and she says, hey, you want to come to church with us on Sunday? And that neighbor said, I came from a church and I haven't gone to church in 2 years since moving here. And I've just been waiting for someone to ask me. And I just thought that was really cool. And now she's like joining the church, which is amazing. And but I don't know when we got like scared of just asking people like, hey, want to eat barbecue with us at our church this Sunday? Like, who doesn't like pig? I don't know when we got scared of that, but we did. And I was grateful that Matt was just like, y'all, just invite people, just as Mark has already said, but just do it, and do it often, and make it part of your language. Just make it part of your language. We are people that need to be invitational. I invite you.
It just goes to prove what they shared with us, that 82% of people who are not in church say they would go if someone they knew and trusted invited them.
Amen.
But I want to take it a step further. The thing that really got to me was in that whole conversation as part of the conference. Matt Miofsky said, I wrote this down because word for word, because I thought it was so important. He said, United Methodist people have gotten good at inviting people to certain things, even to church, but we're not good at inviting them to Jesus. Wow, that hit me hard. I've thought a lot about that since then.
I think for me, the thing that I took back that I've shared with a lot of people, that I've shared with my staff, goes back to Bishop Farr. We've talked a lot about him, but he was really great. And he said, fail fast. And obviously he doesn't mean do things that are going to fail, that are going to fail, but rather give yourself permission to fail. Just do something. He said, nobody knows right now what to do, but just do it. Don't stop doing. And I think that has been a tendency. Like if we don't know what to do, we get paralyzed and we don't do anything. But he said, just fail fast. He said, the problem in the Methodist denomination, the United Methodist denomination, is we fail slowly. So he said, we don't have 15 years to fail. We need to fail fast, and we need to learn from it, and we need to get up and we need to do it again and again and again until we figure out what works. And so I think with that, it gave me permission to think, okay, I'm just going to try some things. And if they fail, let's fail really, really fast. Let's learn some great lessons and let's figure out how to do something else. And if we fail again, we're going to learn at least how not to fail. But I feel like that is something that just giving myself permission to not have to be successful every time we do something and to learn from it. I think that has been really a place of grace that I think we can all learn from. Is, we may fail, but we're still trying.
And even the idea of success, we have certain images of what it means for something to be a success. And more often than not, it is about numbers of people, maybe. And even in this relational emphasis that you all have been talking about, it probably would be successful if one or two people showed up and you had a really meaningful conversation with them, or so also it might include changing our expectations of what successful looks like. Anyway, that just occurs to me, Mandy, from what you said. I was on a call with a bunch of campus ministers earlier this week, and to a person, they kept talking about college students, particularly the way to connect with them or reach them, or is the same thing you've been saying about relationships, about really having to spend time one-on-one listening. And so it just reinforces what you all have been saying today about the need for the relationships being primary for what it means for who the church will be into the future, which is not programs, which is, I think, what we're used to doing in churches is, and for things like an Easter egg hunt, maybe it's how do you make that more relational? How do you train people, still have it as an event, but then how does it also become a relational outreach? Maybe you've put the sign in the front yard, so you've invited the community, but what happens when the community shows up at the egg hunt? Who is prepared to have the conversation, begin to build the relationship, kind of take the next step?
Exactly. And Kim, what you're saying really points out the need for us to partner with the laity. There's when you're talking about slow, trust-building, one-on-one relationships, the church can't depend on the pastor to do all of that for the whole church. It's got to be something that the entire congregation embraces and learns how to do and is excited about doing in all of their networks and in all the places they go and with the people they meet.
Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks to great hope to churches of all sizes. When everything felt like we needed programming, it tipped the scales a little in favor of larger churches to have the resources to do those programming things. But when it's about relationships and it's about trusting each other and spending time together, that really changes the dynamic for churches of all sizes. And maybe even tips the scale a little bit more to smaller churches that know each other and know when people come and go a little bit more. And so I find that to be very, very hope-filled for all of our churches.
What is a unique opportunity for the United Methodist Church in this time, do you think?
Yeah, I think one of the unique opportunities of the Methodist Church is that us as United Methodist people, I know it's an old thing, but we are open-armed folk. We believe in grace that is very inclusive and inviting in. We want to share that grace to all folks because Jesus, died and rose for all folks. It's a beautiful grace. And one of the things in my community that makes us different as a church is we're not like the Christian Nationalist Church down the road. And there's a few of them. We and Stanley, beautiful people, but we're different. Rather, our goal is to be a people that is saying, I can't hold a fence in front of the Lord's table. Rather, we are an open table folk, and everyone can dine at this table because that's just how love works. And we need to be proud about that as Methodist people. We need to be proud about sharing that we have a God. We know a God so that just wants to build authentic relationships with everybody. And it doesn't matter what stripe you have or where you walked in your life, because God is still saying, I love you, child. And that makes us different. That makes us, we are not afraid of the world. Rather, we are a people that are called to transform the world. And that is how we're different than like the Christian Nationalist Church down the road. And that was a big thing in this conference. Let's embrace that. Let's embrace it and just keep sharing the gospel message and how it's an open arm message. In whatever way that fits your context, but always just let us be open-armed people.
They said they plan to take the Beyond Conference on the road and will be hosting it again next year and are looking for other parts of the country, other conferences to have a Beyond Conference. And so if people are interested in this and want to go learn themselves, be on the lookout for those opportunities.
And most of you are on the Western North Carolina Leadership Development Team. So it might be even something that we could talk about in a future team meeting as the opportunity for Western North Carolina to host something like that.
I find a lot of hope in everything you guys have been saying today, primarily just kind of the simplicity of changing our focus back to things like just inviting people to come to church because so many people have never felt like they've gotten that invitation. Things like having conversations with people about Jesus because a lot of us feel like everybody knows about Jesus at this point. But, a lot of times, especially when you're preaching like John is from the lectionary, a lot of times you come across stories that people might not have heard about. And so I think we have a really unique opportunity to kind of have conversations with folks about our lives and share our story, weaving in some of those really interesting stories about mud pies with Jesus and inviting people into relationship that they might not have had before. We are kind of experiencing now this time where people are doing a lot of things online, as we are now, actually, as opposed to being in person. And people are looking for those really simple relationships. And so I am encouraged by you all. I give you thanks for sharing your experiences with us from the conference, sharing quotes with us, sharing a lot of the simple things, but also the ways that you felt as you walked away from that conference. As we are experiencing this shift in the church, I know a lot of us are just looking for some simple signs of hope that all of the things that we are doing will come to fruition. And thank God that we did not create the church, that God created the church. And so the church will go on and that God is continuing to invite us into this work. So I'm encouraged being a part of this group with you all and continuing to share Christ with the world. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for listening to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. We hope you enjoy listening to these podcasts and use them as a way to stay connected to our community. Remember to subscribe to Means of Grace for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us an honest rating and a review. It helps others find this podcast. Follow the WNCC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WNCC-UMC. Once again, that's at WNCC-UMC. Means of Grace is produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church and Andy Go of Gojo Studios.